Out of nowhere, Arsenal have got their third here we go of the summer, with Christian Norgard looking to join the club in the next coming days. Now in this video we're going to talk about the deal, the positives and negatives of the deal overall, and why Arsenal decided to get him, and exactly if it actually makes sense for the planning of the squad and what is going on this summer. So let's get into it. Now Christian Norgard has been a player that has kind of come out of nowhere in the rumours around Arsenal. A couple of days ago it was spoken about if Partey did potentially leave, Norgard would be an option at the table, but even then we expected deals to be done near the end of the month and more into July when Partey's contract officially ends. Now despite that being the case, it looks like Thomas Partey is leaving the club, which has been confirmed by multiple sources, and that has meant that the club have acted quickly, getting in Christian Norgard for around about £10 million, who is already doing his medical where he has completed a deal, so the deal moved very quickly. Now fair to say that this deal has created a lot of emotion from people on Twitter and the internet, and let's say a lot of people aren't exactly happy overall. Now first of all, when you look at Norgard tactically, you have to consider he is quite a different player to Partey overall. Partey is a much better player on the ball at maybe dictating tempo and finding passes through from the back line, although I have mentioned that I think that has been something that has been dropping off for him for the last couple of years. Norgard is a very suitable player on the ball, but it's not necessarily where I think he is the best at. Now if you look at some of his stats, I think in progressive passes they are very good, and you have to consider that he does play for Brentford, and Brentford have a really good mix between playing a low block system and everyone getting back and helping, but also playing a very pressing system to dictate teams, especially them lower teams in the league, and change their methods up, which I do think is one of the reasons why Brentford are a really good team to buy from. With Norgard, I think that he can do both of these roles brilliantly, and from a passing way, I do think that some of his passes are more efficient or effective than necessarily being special. He isn't exactly someone that is going to make these insane passes across the pitch, but he has a good idea of when to make passes, when not to, and kind of ticks things along. Not really that player that is going to be the outstanding passer that's going to create deeper, which shouldn't be too bad if Arsenal do play a double pivot with him still in there. And if you look at the amount of times he has the ball in games and the amount of passes that he does with the completion, it is very low for central midfielders, defensive midfielders. He's not someone that you're going to see really dictate and be on the ball 100 touches a game. He is going to be more of a aggressive off the ball player, a player that is very smart in them ways rather than being that on the ball player. But when you've got to think he is the complement for Zubimendi, the backup for Zubimendi, I think it is important Arsenal get different profiles, and I do think he is a completely different profile to a natural creative passer like a Zubimendi from deep, so it kind of makes sense when you think about it in them ways, despite his weaknesses on the ball. Now despite them maybe slight weaknesses, even though he is still pretty good on the ball, he is more of a traditional defensive midfielder. Now he is a very aggressive player, and like we mentioned, he loves running around and cover a massive area. He was one of the players that ran the most in the last season, and I know he is old and we will get into all of that details, but he can still add valuable options to run around the pitch and give us them legs that people have been talking about. Now straight away we might as well talk about it because it's probably one of the most important things of our team, but he is a very good duel winner. Someone that is very lanky, but he is quite strong as well. He is able to really be aggressive in a tackle and be physical, and it's one of them midfielders that you see at Premier League mid-table clubs nowadays. Someone that is going to be physical into players, always try and win the ball back, and also give it to a game to these big teams, which is something that could be quite helpful. Not only I think is he very good in duels, and I like how he kind of uses his body to go into duels, going body first and then using his feet to kind of come away with the ball, which I think can be very useful. He's also quite a tall player for a central midfielder. He's 6'1" overall, and has also been quite good in the air. Now from midfield and in duels perspective, in the air he is very good. He wins about 1.5 aerials per 90, which is very high within central midfielders, and he contests every ball. Something that I think is going to be very helpful with him coming in is that he is more of a primary defender than necessarily a secondary ball winning player that is going to pick up the ball, and compared to Partey, I think this is where the differences really lie. Partey, we've mentioned it many times before, is someone that will wait for them knockdowns and be very aware with things going off the ball to kind of cover them areas. Norgard can do that, but most of the time he is going to be intent of getting there first. He is going to try and win headers from goal kicks and try and contest them duels with maybe big strikers or other players, making sure that the centre-backs don't have to come out too far. And he is overall very good in the air, using his strength really well, and he's got a brilliant lead. Now, defensively, I do think as well, he is an outstanding player. Some of the defensive work he does, if you look at all his defensive stats, they are incredible. He really puts himself about, but like we mentioned, with Brentford playing this sort of low block to high press system, he is very much someone that has to be very adaptable and has to be someone that covers a lot of ground. So his ability to cover ground, crunch into tackles when you've needed it sometimes, and show that little bit of physicality, which arguably you could say that we are missing in their midfield positions, I think is very important. Do I think he's going to be the most natural tackler in the world? No, I think he will be a little bit rash in some tackles and make some decisions that probably won't be the best. But ultimately, when you expect him to play in the lower league games, he is going to be against players that he expects to physically dominate. And when he can get into them areas, cover the ground really well, I do think his anticipation in midfield is probably one of the most intriguing things about him. He's very good at seeing where danger's coming very early and covering that gap as well, so I do like that. He is going to be that natural tackler in them positions. And if Arsenal do need to move into a low block, if we've got a lead in certain games, he is the perfect player to bring on later in games. He's tall, he's physical, he's brilliant in them deeper situations. And I think going into this season, I think Merino would have been one of them players we would have considered to play in a bit of a defensive midfield role in a low block. Obviously not in any other phase of play, I don't think, but when we need to defend deep, he can help backwards. And I think Norgard just being that hopefully smart player in the tackles and being a natural physical presence in there, also being very good from them balls as well, as a backup makes a lot of sense. And he can cover, I think, a lot more ground than people are giving him credit for. If he can really be physical in them tackles when he covers that area is another thing you have to decide. Going from a system like Brentford's to Arsenal will actually be quite easier for him because he won't have the amount of stress of trying to be running around the whole time to cover people. He'll have a little bit of time off where he can sit back and endure the ball a little bit more. Now, obviously, when you look at Arsenal and how we play on the ball team, very much like to have a lot of progression, it is a very different style. That's why I don't think Norgard coming in would play a lot. Even if Zubimendi got injured, I said this on Twitter, I could easily see a Miles or Rice being used in the defensive midfield spot over him. Depends if we continue with the double pivot. If we do, then Norgard can easily come in. But if Yoel Hato is to sign, I can easily see Miles moving into midfield to give us more depth. And one of the other little caveats to him coming in is that he is a very important player from set pieces. I mean, I think he scored a couple against us now. He's scored quite a lot overall. Generally, he's a very good player within the box, and he's very aware from long throw-ins. He's very alert in the box in these situations, and that is obviously something that we can need. Later on in games, you can easily shove him into these more attacking positions alongside a Merino, alongside a Bryce, if you need to get more crosses in there. And I think overall, when you put all of this together, it kind of makes sense given the fact that he is 31, he is an older player, but he is going to be on a cheaper deal. Now, he is a ball-winning midfielder at the end of the day. He will get the ball back for you and cover a lot of ground to do it. If that does mean that we're going to lose some of that great on-the-ball qualities, that is up for debate, and I definitely think that is something we would have to look at, because something that was really good about Partey was that he did win the ball back, probably not as effectively as someone like Norgard, but then at least he could do something with the ball, at least pass it into someone who can run with it. You're going to have to rely a lot on Miles or Rice alongside a Norgard to actually run and carry that ball away for him. So it's going to be very interesting to see if he can develop that and learn how to pass a little bit more and be a little bit more confident. I think some of his passing is efficient and effective, and I don't think he's the worst player when he's going against a low block or mid block, but I want to see when teams are pressing him if he can be able to get balls out quickly, get balls into other players who can run, and that's going to be something that probably separates him from being a starter to a backup, but it is something that you have to think about nevertheless, even if it isn't that big of a deal. And I think the big thing we have to talk about in this is a lot of people have been saying, well, this is a downgrade on Partey and Zubimendi, and I get that, I understand, and I think overall I say Partey's a better player, very different player, and I'm not sure Partey is exactly what we're looking for in the team right now, and I think defensive transitions is such a liability for him, which I don't see Norgard struggling with anywhere near. But ultimately, like I've said many times, you've got to think about the finances. Norgard is reportedly coming in for around £10 million and 60k a week wages. That is over a third cheaper than what Partey wanted to re-sign with the deal. I think one of the reasons why this has been made is because it is a stopgap option. Now, a stopgap option doesn't need to be a bad signing. It is just a player that will come in for 1 to 2 years. I know his contract might end up being 3, but I can't imagine him staying that long, where he can give us good backup, good legs in that midfield and help us when we need to. I think there's a lot of good midfielders out there. There's even people like Adam Wharton, Baleba, Bouadi. There's so many great midfielders that we could easily invest in within next season and going into the future. Now, it doesn't really worry me because we've quite clearly not not got the money to spend in midfield right now because we need a striker and we need a winger and probably a left back as well if other things happen. Now, I understand the frustration of a lot of Arsenal fans that we haven't done them business yet and we're kind of signing squad players, but we have acted quickly to get a Norgard, to get a Kepa in the last couple of weeks. Now, it really is going to see going into the start of July if we can make them big deals happen, which we need to, but ultimately you don't sign players on priority, you sign them given the market and how you can with opportunities, and it just happens to be that Norgard and Kepa were obviously a lot easier to get in than a Šeško or Gyökeres overall, and I don't have any doubts that Arsenal will sign a striker or left winger, and I think if we get to a couple of weeks time we haven't, then it's reason to panic and be frustrated. But we've needed to pad the squad out for a lot. We've needed to do more of these Jorginho type signings, which in the end was a very successful player for the club, and he's going to bring experience which we've needed and we don't have within our team. He's going to be the oldest player within the squad, which is important. I don't really see many reasons to complain about this signing. He is a very underrated player and actually has been very good for Brentford, for a great team for a while now, and I know his age is something that we'd want a little bit younger, and I think we would want a little bit more inspiring signing. I understand that, but it's really not the end of the world because he is going to be a second/third option in defensive midfield going into the future, and if we do get injuries like we did this season, at least we've got some suitable backups now where hopefully the main players can do the job if we buy a striker and winger, of course. But let me know in the comments what you guys think overall. Do you think it's a good signing? Do you think it's a confusing one? And what do you think about Partey leaving the club? Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you in the next one.